In casual conversation, we often treat the terms Bani Israel and Jew as interchangeable synonyms, using them to describe the same group of people across history. There is a historical basis for this. The ancestry of the Jewish people does trace back to the ancient collective known as Bani Israel. But that lineage doesn't work in reverse. The majority of the ancient members of Bani Israel were never Jewish. This creates a significant categorical mismatch. Bani Israel is a massive ancestral umbrella, while the group we recognize as Jews represents a specific fraction that emerged from within it. Understanding the difference requires tracing how an identity defined strictly by genetics eventually shifted into an identity defined by practice and belief. This history reveals a sharp distinction between the biological groups our ancestors belonged to and the specific cultures that survive to the present day. The story begins roughly in 1800 BCE with a patriarch named Jacob, who was also known as Israel. Jacob had 12 sons, and each son became the patriarch of his own distinct tribe. Collectively, these 12 tribes were called Bani Israel, literally the children of Israel. At this point, the identity was entirely a matter of bloodline. It was dictated by genealogy rather than a unified, codified religious system. By 1000 BCE, this tribal family had established a kingdom that eventually fractured into two separate political entities, the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah. The southern kingdom became the isolated home of the tribe of Judah. While they were politically separate from the other tribes, the people of Judah remained one branch of the broader Bani Israel genetic family. For centuries, their identity remained tied to these physical borders and their specific ancestral lineage. The turning point arrived in 586 BCE, when the Babylonian Empire dismantled the kingdom, forcing its people into captivity, known as the Exile. Because the southern kingdom was the primary target, the captives taken to Babylon were almost exclusively from Judah. The Babylonians identified these captives by their place of origin, calling them Yahudi, the direct root of the word Jew. Severed from their land, the people of Judah faced a crisis. Without a territory to define them, their tribal identity was at risk of disappearing entirely. In response, they began strictly codifying their laws, traditions, and oral histories. This process effectively established Judaism as a portable faith. It moved the center of their identity away from a specific piece of land and toward a shared religious practice. The exile acted as a filter, taking one genetic branch of Bani Israel and refining it into a new, resilient religious identity that could survive anywhere. This raises the question of the other 11 tribes of Bani Israel. If they didn't become Jews, where did they go? Over the following centuries, those other tribes assimilated into the surrounding empires or adopted different faiths, eventually vanishing from the historical record as distinct groups. This is why Bani Israel exists today primarily as an ancestral term, a reference to a prehistoric family tree that no longer functions as a single community. Jewish identity, by contrast, is a living culture. It is the specific part of that ancient lineage that adopted a codified faith and carried it through history. The word itself captures this evolution. It began as a person's name, became a geographic territory, and finally grew into a global belief system. Ultimately, this shows that while genetics provide a starting point, shared values and traditions are what allow a culture to endure across millennia.